From polished senator to shadowed Sith, Sheev Palpatine, Darth Sidious, orchestrated blockades, ignited a galaxy-wide war, and unleashed the Death Star's wrath. How did one man bend democracy to his will, outwit the Jedi, and even cheat death to crown himself emperor? Strap in. You're about to witness the rise of the galaxy's ultimate puppet master. Under Naboo's twin suns, the grand facade of the Palpatine Manor rose above Theed's marble spires, its gilded halls echoing with hushed courtesies and whispered secrets. Young Sheev Palpatine moved through these corridors like a shadow in silk, fingers brushing the polished ivory rails, as he watched courtiers and senators drift by in glittering finery. Born 84 years before the Battle of Yavin, he was the last scion of an ancient aristocratic line, though some said his family's old blood carried more ambition than benevolence. On his right hand, Sheev wore the family signet ring, a circlet of fine gold inlaid with the Palpatine crest, its lines worn smooth by generations of patrician fingers. To others, it signified nobility and stability. To Sheev, it whispered of legacy and power waiting to be claimed. In the mirrored hall of portraits, grand dames of Naboo society and stern patriarchs perched in oil on canvas, his reflection trembled between boyhood and destiny. Each ancestor's painted gaze seemed to challenge him. What will you make of the name you inherit? By day, he sat in the Senate delegation chamber as Naboo's youthful senator, listening politely to debates over trade tariffs and agricultural subsidies. He learned the art of speechcraft in these plush seats, where every phrase carried weight and every pause invited applause. Yet while apprentices of aristocratic houses practiced etiquette, Sheev catalogued far subtler lessons: how to bend wills with a frown, how to weave fear into legislation. Each handshake became a test of whose loyalty he could buy, each smile a mask hiding the seeds of ambition. At night, in the Manor's hidden wing, Sheev studied holoscripts on galactic finance and ancient texts on the Force that he secretly borrowed from the temple archives. He traced runes with a slender quill, seeking patterns in midichlorian flow and the subtlest fractures in Republic lore. The signet ring's cold weight against his heart served as a reminder. Privilege demands purpose. One moonlit evening, beneath frescoed ceilings depicting Naboo's founding myths, Sheev discovered a concealed door behind a tapestry of Queen Elsinore's coronation. The door led to a spiral staircase carved from jadestone. He followed it into damp catacombs, where drifting candlelight revealed Sith runes half erased by time. There, in the flicker, he first sensed a presence older than the Republic itself, a hushed power that spoke of alchemy, politics, and blood. At the bottom of the stairs, a lone figure waited. Darth Plagueis, the whispered master of life and death, cloaked in shadows deeper than the chamber's gloom. The Sith Lord's eyes glowed with measured curiosity as he plucked the signet ring from Sheev's hand and let it dangle by its chain. "Your lineage grants you privilege," Plagueis murmured, "but ambition demands sacrifice." He traced the ring's crest with a fingertip. "Tell me, young senator, are you prepared to learn what true power costs?" Sheev's pulse thundered, the gold ring a cool echo in his palm. In that breathless moment, destiny bent toward darkness. He nodded once, silent and irrevocable. The gilded halls of Naboo lay far above, bathed in moonlight, their marble pillars a pale witness to a pact born in shadow. From the heights of aristocracy to the depths of Sith alchemy, Sheev Palpatine would walk a path few dared to follow. And it began here with a simple question posed by a master in hidden catacombs. "What price are you willing to pay for eternity?" A chance meeting with Darth Plagueis ignites forbidden desire. Moonlight pooled like liquid silver on Moonilinst's plated streets as Sheev Palpatine slipped through the city's mechanized arteries toward the hidden biolabs. His footsteps were swallowed by the hiss of cooling vents and distant drone of hover platforms, every shadow a cloak for his clandestine purpose. In a side corridor riddled with neural lock doors keyed only to one genetic signature, Palpatine paused before a reinforced vault. He placed a gloved hand on the scanner, heart thrumming with anticipation. The door slid open to reveal a cavernous chamber alight with phosphorescent vats and humming containment cylinders. At the center of the lab, suspended in a lattice of conduit and stasis fluid, floated the phosphorus essence vial, its pale yellow glow pulsing like a heartbeat. Palpatine approached as if drawn by magnets, eyes glinting with the promise of forbidden alchemy. This vial held the first secret of life made malleable, distilled from Sith experimentation on midi-chlorian currents. With a steady hand, Palpatine retrieved it, cradling the glass as though it were the galaxy's greatest treasure. "Welcome, Apprentice," rasped a voice from the shadows. Darth Plagueis emerged, his form half hidden by the lab's dim light. His robes swept the floor, dark as the space between stars, and his eyes shone with ancient knowledge. "You have proved your loyalty. Now you shall learn the rule of two, one to embody power, the other to crave it." Palpatine bowed, holding the vial aloft. "Master, I am ready to serve." He tasted the essence's warmth through the glass, a spark of exhilaration igniting in his chest. Plagueis nodded and motioned to the vast holoprojector banks lining the walls. "For centuries, our predecessors hid in mystery," Plagueis began, voice low as a grave's echo. "But the Sith endure through patience, precision, and partnership. You will learn to wield this essence to extend life, to bend mortality's edge, and to see the Republic rise and fall by your design. But first, you must master the essentials." He led Palpatine to a containment pod where an engineered bioform lay dormant. The creature, half organic, half artifice, had been designed to test the essence's regenerative properties. Plagueis placed a drop of phosphorus fluid on the form's palm. The hand twitched, skin knitting itself back together in a silent rush of energy. "Observe," Plagueis whispered. "Now you understand that life and death flow from our will." Palpatine's breath caught. "It is astonishing." He reached out, guiding a second drop onto the form's chest. The torso rose and fell in a primal breath. This power could save billions, or destroy them. Plagueis smiled, a rare warmth in his aged features. "And so it must be in the hands of one who understands that true power demands sacrifice." He paused, letting the words sink in. "But the essence alone is not enough. You must learn subterfuge, politics, and the art of pulling strings behind the scenes." Over the next cycles, Palpatine's days blurred between biolab experiments and late-night councils in Plagueis's private chambers. He dissected ancient Sith holocrons, studied treaties he would later manipulate, and practiced the lethal elegance of Sith lightning on sparring constructs. All the while, the phosphorus essence vial rested on a pedestal between master and apprentice, its glow a silent reminder of what they sought: dominion over life's greatest mystery. One night, under a storm-lashed sky, Plagueis summoned Palpatine to the lab's upper balcony, overlooking the pulsating cityscape. Thunder rolled as if the world itself applauded their secret. Plagueis raised his hand, stirring a swirl of dark energy in his palm. "You have learned much," he said. Now you must weave that knowledge into the Republic's veins. Prepare to enact our first grand design." Palpatine's lips curved with controlled excitement. "The blockade of Naboo," he replied, voice steady. "A crisis born of competition, yet spun as an act of protection. The Senate will applaud our resolution while we tighten our grip." Plagueis nodded approvingly. "Precisely. We will throttle their trade routes, spreading panic that calls for strong leadership. Then, under the guise of crisis, you shall ascend." He placed a guiding hand on Palpatine's shoulder. "Remember, always appear the benevolent hand, even as you pull the strings." The apprentice inhaled the humid night air, sensing the symphony of manipulation echoing through the Force. He glanced down at the vial of essence, its light mingling with distant city glows. In that instant, he felt the weight of his destiny and the thrill of the power to shape life, death, and empire. Together, master and apprentice turned away from the balcony and descended back into the shadowed laboratories. The phosphorus essence pulsed gently between them, a beacon of forbidden knowledge, a promise of eternal influence. And as they vanished into the labyrinth, the Republic slept on, unaware that its fate had already been sealed by Sith ambition. Master and apprentice engineer the Republic's downfall. The sun dipped beneath Coruscant's endless skyline as Sheev Palpatine arrived at the Senate banking district, his gilded hollow coin tucked into the inner pocket of his diplomatic robes. The coin gleamed with subtle authority, a symbol of both wealth and covert allegiance, passed hand to hand in secret conclaves of corporate magnates and political insiders. In the echoing marble halls, beneath soaring columns crowned with hollow banners of Republic unity, Palpatine moved like a performer stepping onto a stage he had meticulously engineered. By day, he spoke softly of fiscal responsibility and planetary aid, his warm baritone carrying through the Senate galleries like gentle rain. He praised budgetary prudence while concealing amendments that funneled trillions of credits into his consortium's accounts and secret war funds. Every proposal was a dagger wrapped in velvet. Loan packages that rescued struggling systems while binding them forever to his ledger. Trade agreements that boosted Naboo's exports, but strangled rival planets with invisible tariffs. Senators applauded, unaware that their applause funded the very crises they lamented. In private meetings behind etched hollow doors, Palpatine slipped the hollow coin across crystal conference tables to grateful committee chairs. "A gesture of trust," he'd murmur, watching their eyes sparkle as they pocketed the coin and the promise it carried. A future contract, a confidential briefing, a cushioned landing for an otherwise precarious career. Then, as the doors sealed and the council droids departed, he pressed his gloved finger to a hidden panel beneath the table, transmitting data sigs that would reroute each senator's personal assets through his controlled banks. By night's end, he knew their secrets, their debts, and their deepest ambitions. Yet Palpatine's true mastery lay in suggestion rather than command. He orchestrated rumors at clandestine dinners in opulent sky palaces, letting whispers of Senate scandals drift into the air like perfumed smoke. A rumor here of off-book defense spending, a whisper there of missing children on a mid-rim world, a murmur of a Jedi Knight seen too close to a sensitive banking vault. By clouding the Senate with half-truths, he ensured that its members looked to him for clarity, for resolution, for someone who could stabilize their shaky dominions. When the Trade Federation's droid cruisers lurched into Naboo's space lanes, Palpatine feigned outrage on the Senate floor, decrying the blockade as an unjust act of aggression. His voice thundered through comm channels, rallying sympathetic senators to defend Naboo's sovereignty. Yet behind that cloak of indignation lay the final stroke of his design, the crisis he had nurtured in backroom whispers, financed through shadow accounts and manipulated through subtle votes. The blockade was the perfect storm, economic sabotage presented as geopolitical conflict, a manufactured emergency for which Palpatine alone offered both the diagnosis and the cure. As the Senate debated security measures, Palpatine slipped into a side chamber beneath the banking towers, greeting a cluster of Federation delegates with a courteous nod. He bade them negotiate in good faith, all the while ensuring that their coffers remained fat with credits he had secretly allocated. When they emerged to demand new terms from his fellow senators, he was there to broker a compromise, one that strengthened his own position and tightened the noose around Naboo's trade routes. Throughout those turbulent weeks, Palpatine's gilded holocoin surfaced in the hands of key negotiators and undecided legislators, a silent reminder of where true power lay. His public addresses spoke of compromise and unity. His private dealings ensured that every faction he touched became a strand in his web. He stoked fears of separatism to justify emergency voting rights, then portrayed himself as the Republic's rock amid the storm. Each crisis he stoked translated into more authority, more credits, more votes, more control. In the waning hours before the final Senate tally, Palpatine stood beneath Coruscant's domed roof, watching the glow of quadricentennial torches illuminate the galleries. He felt the tremor of hope and fear among the delegates, an undertow stronger than any galactic tide. Then, with measured calm, he cast the decisive vote, recognizing the Federation's blockade as an act of war against Naboo's sovereign rights. The chambers exploded in cheers and cries for unity under a single leader. In that moment, the senator from Naboo became the savior of the Republic, and the path to Supreme Chancellor yawned wide before him. As midnight chimed through crystal loudspeakers across Coruscant, Palpatine returned to his private quarters, the hollow coin resting like a heartbeat above his robes. He removed it, placed it on his desk, and watched its golden surface catch the ambient glow. This coin, simple in form yet profound in consequence, had turned the Senate's machinery into his own instrument. The blockade of Naboo was no isolated flashpoint, but the opening movement in his grand symphony of power. In the silence of his chamber, he allowed himself a small, satisfied smile. A single session of manipulation had elevated him from a respected senator to the Republic's indispensable leader. And as dawn's first light washed the city in rose and gold, he set aside the hollow coin, ready for the next chapter. A chapter that would end with his hand resting on the Chancellor's throne and the Republic trembling under his shadow. The blockade of Naboo paves his path to Supreme Chancellor. Senate chambers flooded with ivory light as Sheev Palpatine, newly elected Supreme Chancellor, rose to address the gathered body. The polished marble floors reflected the swirl of colorful robes, the hum of conversation halting as his calm baritone filled the space. In his hand, he held a cracked comlink, engraved with the Senate seals, a token of his authority and a reminder of fragile loyalties beneath each senator's smile. Momentarily, he cradled the device, its fracture racing like a spiderweb across the metal, evidence of late-night urgings and whispered deals that had brought him here. "My fellow representatives of the Republic," Palpatine began, voice steady. "These are perilous times. Systems torn by conflict cry out for decisive leadership." Behind him, holoscreens flickered with images of battles raging on distant worlds, Jedi knights dueling in crumbling cities, and terrified refugees fleeing their homes. Palpatine's gaze swept the assembly, each senator mapped in his cunning mind as a piece on a galactic chessboard. Within days of his election, Palpatine invoked emergency powers under Article 1, Section 2 of the Republic Charter. He argued that swift action was needed to quell separatist threats. Senate debates dragged on, but every delay, every filibuster, became another lever he pulled. The cracked comlink at his side buzzed with messages from key allies, military governors begging for reinforcements, merchant guilds calling for secure trade corridors, even Jedi Council members urging restraint. He acknowledged each plea with a nod, then quietly redirected their credits and ambitions toward his unfolding strategy. Meanwhile, in the Jedi Temple's subterranean attack chambers, panic rippled through the Council. Ambassador Amidala had narrowly escaped the blockade on Naboo, and now the Jedi had sent detachments to protect other worlds under siege. Master Yoda's voice trembled over encrypted comlinks. Growing unrest, we sense. Safe, we are not. Palpatine seized on these words, leaking them to sympathetic senators as proof that invasion by the Republic's own defenders was imminent. Fear spread like wildfire, fear he alone could soothe. In one decisive session on the Senate floor, Palpatine held aloft the cracked comlink. "This instrument has carried your trust into my office," he intoned. "Today, I ask you to grant me powers to defend the Republic until peace is restored." He paused, letting the silence settle like snow. Then, almost imperceptibly, he tapped the comlink's fracture as though drawing strength from its flaws. "Extend me emergency authority," he implored, "and I will ensure our democracy endures." The vote was swift and overwhelming. Delegates wearing newly minted medals pinned to their robes rose in unison, sealing his decree. Within hours, Palpatine signed executive orders mobilizing the Grand Army of the Republic, requisitioning starfighter squadrons, and centralizing financial control under his command. The cracked comlink, once merely a symbol, became the instrument of dictatorial reach, transmitting orders that bypassed regular channels and silenced dissent. Under the cover of war, he restructured the Senate itself, creating security councils with veto power, dissolving committees that questioned his edicts, and packing critical votes with loyalists who owed their rise to his favor. In Coruscant's marble corridors, ministers who had once debated trade quotas now marched in lockstep behind his flagship decrees. Dissenting voices were labeled separatists and swiftly removed from office. A flicker of protest here, a murmur of unease there. Each was quelled with grants, threats, or the subtle promise of the comlink's broken brother in a trusted hand. At the Jedi Temple, concern grew as the clones deployed under Palpatine's orders shifted from peacekeeping to aggressive campaigns. The Council convened behind closed doors, lightsabers ignited in silent demonstration, yet no decree could override the Chancellor's emergency powers. Forbidden to take up arms against a sitting Supreme Chancellor, the Jedi found themselves bound by their own statutes as worlds burned around them. And so, with war declared and emergency authority secured, Palpatine stood on the balcony of his private chambers, gazing out over Coruscant's shimmering lights. In his hand, the cracked comlink pulsed with the night's final messages. Troop deployments, security briefings, congratulatory notes from governors. Each transmission ratified his transformation from elected leader to absolute sovereign. He let the device fall to his desk, fracture glittering like a promise unbroken. Behind him, his reflection shimmered in the obsidian window. A man who had bent democracy until it yielded dictatorship without a single drop of blood spilled on Coruscant's polished floors. Beyond the war's chaos, he would rule unchallenged, his gambit complete, his grip on power unassailable. With war declared, he secures dictatorial authority. Amid endless storm-tossed seas on Camino, vats of swirling genetic fluid glowed with eerie bioluminescence, each containing a near-perfect copy of Jedi DNA. Sheev Palpatine stood upon a raised observation deck, the acrid scent of chlorinated mist and synth protein hanging heavy in the air. His gaze rested on a single cloning template shard, an oblong fragment of crystalline data that pulsed with the blueprint of a galaxy's new army. In that shard lay the culmination of years of secret maneuvering, the power to unleash legions without loyalty to the Jedi Order. The Kaminoan researchers bowed as Palpatine passed, their wet-clad forms slipping between steel catwalks and the hum of bioreactors. He raised a gloved finger, and one vat's fluid stilled. With a subtle gesture, the researchers injected the phosphorus essence serum he had commissioned, accelerating the accelerated growth cycle. Within moments, a row of clone cadets rose, muscular, uniform, and expressionless behind mirrored visors. Each carried the insignia of the Republic, though none had sworn oaths to the Jedi. Palpatine sensed the Force undulate with their awakening, a controlled wave of raw potential. "Excellent," he whispered. "The galaxy's greatest guardians will soon be its greatest weapon." The shard glowed brighter at his side, echoing the surge of created life. He turned away from the vats and descended to the docking bay, where tripod transports waited beneath cold fluorescent lights. Each transport would carry thousands of clone troopers to Coruscant's war rooms and beyond. Back on the Galactic capital, the Senate War Council convened in its circular chamber, hollow projectors mapping star systems under threat. Palpatine entered as Chancellor and Supreme Commander, the cracked comlink from the last emergency session clenched in his hand. He placed it on the central console and activated the War Council override. Instantly, the chamber's mood shifted. Panic gave way to grim resolve. "Under my authority, we deploy the clone army," Palpatine declared, voice calm amid the rising tensions. Senators gasped and murmured, unprepared for such a bold move. Master Yoda's visage flickered on the holoscreen, eyes narrowing. "Created this army was, as a contingency," the Grand Master warned. "Without oversight, perilous this path becomes." Palpatine nodded, offering Yoda a veneer of respect. "The Jedi will oversee its training and deployment." Yet behind those words lay the final stroke of his design. An army answerable to no one but him, poised to strike on his command. As the session adjourned in reluctant applause, Palpatine slipped the shard into his sleeve, its blueprint encrypted with hidden directives. In the following weeks, Coruscant's war rooms became a maze of flickering hollows and frantic commands. Clone troopers deployed to Onderon, Christophsis, Ryloth, each mission monitored by Jedi generals unaware that their most loyal troops bore secret kill codes. Palpatine watched from his private balcony as the galaxy fractured under pitched battles. Every call for Jedi intervention played directly into his hands. Each distress signal justified greater emergency powers and further erosion of civil liberties. Under siege, the Jedi Council pleaded for his leadership, beseeching him to rally the Republic and protect peace. Palpatine presented himself as the steadfast pillar amid chaos, guiding military strategy with measured authority. He sent clone legions to rescue besieged civilians, plastering holoboards with credits of gratitude. Yet each victory came at a hidden cost, encoded orders buried in the cloning template, awaiting the moment to turn the blades inward. In a quiet recess of Coruscant's highest command tower, Palpatine convened with Lord Tyrannus, his secret Sith apprentice Count Dooku. The shard lay on the table between them, its facets reflecting the cold lights. "The Jedi trust these clones," Palpatine murmured, "and they will wield them as long as they believe their oath binds them. When the time comes, Order 66 will strike." Dooku bowed. "And the Republic will be ours." His voice was a whisper of finality. As clone regiments marched in formation under the Jedi banner, Palpatine traced the wars unfolding in his holograph. Each battle drained the Jedi's strength while amplifying the clones' efficiency. By orchestrating both sides, fueling separatist advances through Dooku and rallying Republic forces through false emergencies, Palpatine guided the galaxy into a spiral of conflict he alone could control. Days before the decisive engagement on Christophsis, Palpatine summoned Grand Moff Tarkin to a secure briefing. "Prepare the secret battalions," he ordered, referencing Ultra Black Ops clone divisions trained for covert operations. Tarkin's eyes glittered with anticipation. "As you command, Chancellor." With the directive encrypted in the template shard, those battalions slipped unseen across front lines. When the Jedi arrived, they found clone legions vigilant and loyal, until Palpatine's whispered code crackled through their comlinks. At his command, they turned their weapons on Jedi generals. Blaster fire erupted in command chambers and training grounds alike. The Clone Wars had served its purpose. The Jedi, guardians turned victims of the very army they forged, fell in droves. In the aftermath, Palpatine addressed the Senate once more, voice laden with sorrow and resolve. "The Jedi attempted a coup," he lamented, holding the cracked comlink aloft as proof. "They sought to overthrow the Republic." Senators recoiled, and Palpatine seized the moment. "I assume emergency control of all military operations." The final pieces aligned, and the Senate granted him unlimited power. Under siege, the Jedi plead for his leadership, one final step toward empire. The crimson lava of Mustafar painted the sky as Darth Sidious, once Senator Palpatine, watched the hollow feed of Jedi Temple anxieties flicker in his private war room on Coruscant. Beside him lay the Scarlet Execution Code Scroll, a single parchment etched with the forbidden command known only to those of the Sith. Its edges were singed, as though by the very flames of betrayal it sanctioned. With a final breath, he unrolled it and intoned the hidden phrase that would rend the galaxy's guardians from within. On distant battlefields, clone troopers fought under the bright standard of the Republic, but at Sidious's command, their loyalty shifted. "Execute Order 66, the voice crackled through encrypted comlinks. In a heartbeat, Jedi generals found blaster fire at their backs. Master after master fell where they stood. Ahsoka Tano, betrayed by the 501st at the Siege of Mandalore, Kit Fisto, felled in the Senate's corridors, and countless others whose names would be lost to history. The war they had fought to contain became the instrument of their demise. Meanwhile, on Mustafar, Anakin Skywalker, now Darth Vader, struggled across the smoking banks of that volcanic world, lightsaber in hand. He had come to destroy the separatist leaders remaining in the shadowed corridors of their final fortress. Yet when he cut down General Grievous's clone bodyguards, he felt a surge of the same code that echoed across the galaxy. He hesitated as the hollow call came through. "Rise, Lord Vader. The Jedi are traitors." Even his newly forged black armor could not quench the shock that trembled through his spine. He watched through the Force as Obi-Wan's name flickered across the code feed, then extinguished forever. Back on Coruscant, Sidious strode through the Senate's empty halls, the echo of his boots a funeral drum. The Jedi Temple's holocrons fell silent. The great chamber where Mace Windu once argued for restraint now lay in shadow. Council artifacts lay shattered. Portraits of past masters burned in the catastrophic fires of betrayal. Sidious entered the catacombs beneath the temple, where surviving Jedi, fleeing the Purge, sought refuge in sacred vaults. His lightsaber's crimson glow cut through the darkness. Each vault he opened revealed another broken covenant, another trust violated. Emerging into the cold night, Sidious gazed upon the city he had conquered without a drop of Coruscant blood spilled in riot or rebellion. The Republic's Senate building lay dark, its marble dome scarred by flame and smoke from the cloning vats below. With a subtle swirl of his crimson blade, he carved the final phrase into the central Senate dais. "The Republic is dissolved." Underneath, he carved one word: Empire. Across the hall, the new Imperial flag, black field, red emblem, was unfurled. In the silent assembly chamber, holograms of star systems dimmed and were replaced by the stark sigil of the Empire. Governors and bureaucrats, those not already allied by fear or ambition, fell to their knees, pledging fealty to their new emperor. In that hush, a lone heartbeat echoed the unimaginable speed of Sidious's ascendancy. War to tyranny in a single stroke. In the outer city districts, clone battalions marched beneath stormtrooper helmets molded from the Jedi's own visage. Emblems once worn in honor, now repurposed as instruments of oppression. Citizens peered from behind shutters as the Grand Army transformed into the Imperial Guard. The Jedi, once panoplied champions, were hunted as enemies of the state, their temples burned, their archives sealed, their teachings outlawed. Yet even as the Empire rose, Sidious did not rest. In hidden chambers, he supervised the construction of his greatest weapon, the first Death Star, a moon-sized orbital station capable of annihilating whole worlds. Blueprints hung across war room walls, each corridor sketched in meticulous detail. He studied them by the glow of the Scarlet Scroll's ember, ensuring that the final purge would extend beyond the Jedi to any who dared defy Imperial will. That day, the galaxy's promise of freedom slipped beneath the tide of fear. Sidious's face, so familiar in diplomatic portraits, was now the final visage of authority. His laughter, soft and hollow, echoed through the halls where once spirited debate had reigned. The Jedi Order lay shattered. The Republic was no more. In their place stood the Empire, forged in betrayal, enforced by clones turned guards, and sanctified by the blood of heroes. The Scarlet Scroll burned at both ends in Sidious's study, its ink smudged by the sweat of his triumph. He rolled it closed, sealing the command for all time. Order 66 complete, Jedi purged, Empire born. Before him lay a new era under his iron will, one that would test the boundaries of power and the resilience of hope. The Republic crumbles. His new empire is born. In the cavernous briefing room of the Death Star, rows of Moffs and Grand Admirals stood at rigid attention, their faces illuminated by the harsh glare of flickering hollow projectors. At the center of the room, Darth Sidious, his regal robes replaced by the austere black of the Emperor, addressed his lieutenants with a measured calm that belied the storm he had unleashed. In his hand, he held an Imperial cog emblazoned medal, its sharp edges pressed into his palm as a reminder of the authority it represented. This symbol, once distributed sparingly to commanders who had proven their loyalty, now glinted on chests throughout the Imperial hierarchy, a silent promise of favor and a whispered threat against dissent. "Citizens of the galaxy," Sidious intoned, voice amplified to fill every corner of the chamber. "Look to the Empire and know that peace is found in unity under one vision." He held the medal aloft, its cogwheel design catching the light like a watchful eye. "We have forged stability from chaos. We have delivered security in place of terror, and yet vigilance must never waver." Behind him, the schematics of star systems under Imperial occupation rotated in ghostly green lines, each node marked with a glowing emblem denoting sector governors handpicked by the Emperor himself. In the front row, Grand Moff Tarkin stepped forward to accept his own cog-emblazoned medal. Sidious pinned it to Tarkin's uniform, the metal chilling against the Grand Moff's chest. "Your leadership of the Outer Rim will ensure that no spark of rebellion takes root," the Emperor whispered, voice low but carrying weight. Tarkin inclined his head, expression carved in stone, before returning to his seat. His presence now as much a symbol of Imperial reach as the Death Star's looming silhouette. Across the galaxy, in distant Moff gatherings, similar ceremonies unfolded. On Lothal, Moff Gideon's officers marched through dusty courtyards as he distributed medals to stormtroopers whose patrols had crushed insurgent cells. On Jeddah, where the first whispers of rebellion had sparked, Moff Natasi Darla awarded her enforcers medals for preserving the sanctity of the Empire's order, even as the city's ancient temples lay in ruin. Each medal ceremony reinforced the same message: loyalty rewarded, dissent punished, fear justified. Back aboard the Death Star, the Emperor watched as his military machine hummed with efficiency. Battle plans for quelling remaining pockets of resistance flickered on the holoscreen. Star destroyers awaited hyperspace coordinates. TIE squadrons rotated after refit. Generals and admirals adjusted tactical parameters according to the latest intelligence. The rebellion, once a fledgling movement of idealists, had become a name the Empire whispered like a threat, and any who spoke it aloud risked the same fate as the Jedi. Yet even as Sidious oversaw the consolidation of power, he felt the first flickers of weakness in his own flesh. The lava burns on Mustafar had left his body reliant on his black armor and life support systems, each breath mediated by servos and filters. In the privacy of his meditation chamber, the Emperor removed the medal from his chest and let it rest on a silken cushion. He gazed at the cog's interlocking teeth and saw the Empire's machinery laid bare, precise, unstoppable, but dependent on him at every turn. He placed a gloved hand over the medal's scarred surface and whispered, "Security through strength. Security through fear." But the words felt hollow against the hum of the station's engines and the distant rumble of reactor cores. Even the Death Star, his ultimate symbol of power, relied on others to maintain its systems. His years of dictatorship had taught him that rulership was both a crown and a cage. Meanwhile, whispers of discontent rippled beneath the Empire's steel surface. In the lower levels of Coruscant, Imperial agents uncovered secret meetings of factory workers, disillusioned by forced labor. In the Outer Rim, local governors grumbled over crushing tax burdens and shipping quotas. Even among the officer corps, some resented the meteoric rise of those who had earned their medals through brutality rather than strategy. Sidious had sown fear, and now he saw the sprouts of paranoia sprouting in the hearts of his own command. To remind himself of his own ascent, the Emperor recalled the cracked comlink that had once symbolized his emergency powers. He had shattered one chain of command to replace it with another. Now the medals he distributed became the new link binding the galaxy to his will. But like any chain, it could rust, it could break. He knew he needed an anchor stronger than medals and fear. A quiet knock interrupted his reverie. Darth Vader entered. His respirators hiss the only sound. Sidious gestured to the medal. "Fear has held the Empire together," he said softly. "But loyalty built on fear alone eventually fractures. We must forge a new bond." Vader inclined his head. "My master, the men and women who serve you do so because they believe in your vision. Some quietly whisper of justice under your reign." Sidious's mask of calm returned. "Then we shall remind them of the power they follow. Bring me a demonstration of that loyalty in the form of a captured rebel cell." He paused. "And Vader, ensure that their trial is public." As Vader departed, the Emperor refastened the medal to his chest and turned back to the holoscreen, where the galaxy played out like a board game in his hands. The Senate chamber now stood empty, a relic of a bygone era. The Jedi were gone, the Republic dissolved, and the Empire rose on pillars of fear and spectacle. But Sidious understood that fear alone was a brittle foundation. His gaze drifted to the central core reactor's calm glow. The station hummed with latent promise, a power to destroy worlds, yes, but also a beacon of control that could be wielded to galvanize obedience. The next phase of his reign would not just silence dissent with fear, it would bind hearts with awe. A wounded emperor retreats into shadows, but the Sith endure. Molten rivers of fire carved glowing scars through Mustafa's jagged valleys as Darth Vader stood amid the inferno, cloaked in ashen robes that bore the scent of brimstone and sorrow. At his feet lay the shattered hilt of his former lightsaber, a symbol of his final transformation. Its fractured metal glinted dully against blackened rock, each shard a testament to the night he crucified his past alongside his apprentice's betrayal. Vader knelt. The hiss of his breath masked the only sound above the roar of lava, and pressed gloved fingers against the broken hilt. Memories flickered. The warmth of Padmé's smile, the thunderous clash with Obi-Wan, the moment his loyalty cracked like the metal in his hand. On Coruscant, meanwhile, Sheev Palpatine reveled in triumph. His new apprentice, Darth Vader, had enacted Order 66's cruel finale and silenced the Jedi. Yet Sidious felt the first tremors of uncertainty. In the Emperor's private chambers, he watched holofeeds of Mustafa's devastation, aware that his apprentice's emergence had been as much a personal rebirth as a demonstration of Sith power. He caressed the scarlet scroll that had delivered Order 66, then turned to the holomap, tracking Vader's downed shuttle. "Rise, my apprentice," he whispered, "and claim your destiny." Vader's breaths rasped as he rose from the ash. The stench of burned flesh clung to his armor, and his body ached with wounds both old and new. He secured the shattered hilt in a pouch at his side and activated his comlink. A flicker of hope sparked when Sidious's voice crackled through. "Vader, your trials are not yet complete. Return to me for the healing I alone can grant." Vader's response was a silent nod to the swirling lava below. He had strayed too far on the path of vengeance. Only the Emperor's will could guide him back to purpose. His damaged starfighter, its hull scarred by Mustafa's firestorms, lay half buried in cooled slag. Vader climbed into the cockpit, every movement stiff with pain, and set coordinates for Imperial Medical Bay Delta 7 on the Death Star. As launch clamps released, the volcanic world receded into his viewport, its blood-red glow fading beneath Coruscant's distant stars. With each parsec traveled, Vader felt the Force's currents shift around him, drawing him back into the dark heart of the Empire. The Death Star's docking bay thundered beneath him as he landed, stormtroopers parting like shadows before his presence. They saluted without hesitation, recognizing him not merely as a general, but as the living emblem of Sith resurgence. They ferried him on a stretcher through antiseptic corridors lit by sterile white lights, passing hatches labeled Medical Bay, Level 3, and Biological Containment. Parenthesized warnings flickered. Authorized personnel only, reminders that life here was both precious experiment and commodity. Within the medical bay's inner sanctum, white-coated technicians swarmed around Vader's inert form. They stripped away charred robes, inspecting burns that ran deep beneath his cybernetic limbs. At the center of the chamber stood a cradle of life support apparatus, the very device that would preserve the breathing husk of Anakin Skywalker, now known as Darth Vader. Crystal vials of phosphorus serum, heirlooms from Plagueis' alchemical vaults, rested on gurneys, ready to mend flesh and mend loyalty. As machines whirred and droids administered cortical stimulators, Vader drifted between consciousness and the void. He saw specters of Mustafa's lava in his mind's eye and felt the rasping breaths of pain. Then a calm, overlord voice echoed, "Rise, Vader. In pain lies purpose." Sidious stood at the foot of the table, robes billowing in unseen currents. "You have become more than a weapon," he intoned. "You are the Empire's will made flesh." Technicians injected the life serum into Vader's veins. Light flared in his network of conduits as circuits reconnected and flesh knit under unseen processes. His new form took shape, pallid skin drawn tight over metal frames, eyes glowing behind lenses that hid the soul within. He gasped, machinery hissing in response, as his breath found rhythm in the sterile air. With each pulse of pomade, each contraction of reconstructed lung tissue, he was reforged. Sidious watched the process with inscrutable calm. When the last serum drip echoed through the chamber, he approached Vader's side. "Look upon what you have become," he said. "Together, we will forge a new order." Vader's head lifted, the crackle of his respirator a question and a promise. He touched the cracked lightsaber hilt at his side, feeling both the weight of loss and the spark of rebirth. With mechanical grace, he knelt before his master, helmeted head bowed. Yet within the kneel lay more than submission. It was a vow to channel the anguish of Mustafa into unbreakable loyalty, to wield the Emperor's will with the precision of a blade forged in finality. As Sidious placed a hand on Vader's shoulder, guiding him to stand, the medical bay's lights dimmed in reverence, the only witness to the birth of a legend. Vader rose from the antiseptic cradle of his resurrection, a figure of living dread clad in black armor. The shattered hilt remained cradled in his hand, a reminder of both sinew and steel, of who he had been and what he must become. As droids retracted his medical supports and technicians cleared the way, he followed the silent path through the Death Star's heart, each step steeled for the battles ahead. Beyond the bay, Coruscant's spires gleamed like distant stars calling him home, yet his destiny lay with the Emperor and the Empire beyond. The galaxy had witnessed his fall, but now he stood reborn, a sentinel of fear and a vessel of the Sith will. And though he kneeled at his master's side, the shattered lightsaber hilt pulsed with the power of a legacy sealed in fire. Vader kneels at his side, but destiny yet calls. Far beyond the map's edge, on the storm-lashed world of Exile, Darth Sidious oversaw the construction of nightmares. In the vaulted citadel's obsidian halls, hidden labs hummed with forbidden experiments, vats of synthesized essence, vats of warped midi-chlorian cultures, and banks of cryptic data holocrons humming with lost Sith lore. In one vault, a single holocron fragment glowed pale green beneath a glass dome, its fractured surface etched with runes too ancient for most to decipher. This hidden holocron held the blueprint for a new puppet. Snoke, a shape molded in secret, designed to command the shadows long after Sidious's own demise. Midnight storms raged outside as crimson lightning lanced through the citadel's narrow windows. Sidious stood before the holocron, robes billowing like dark wings, watching as his acolytes, skeletal figures in hooded cloaks, tended to embryonic forms in containment cells. These hushed laboratories were the final forge of Sith continuity, guardians of the rule of two, turned to engineers of an entire clandestine order. Snoke's vessel, fashioned from scattered genetics and Sith alchemy, lay in stasis. His mind, encoded on the holocron fragment, waited for activation. "Awaken him," Sidious intoned, voice echoing in the vaulted silence. The acolytes complied, crooking their fingers over control glyphs. The fragment's runes flared, bathing the chamber in sickly green light. Across the rows of tanks, one figure stirred. Tall, gaunt, eyes flickering open like dying stars. Snoke was born in shadow, his body a canvas of Sidious's darkest designs, his mind a puppet of the Emperor's final edict. Sidious stepped forward, fingertips tracing the holocron's cracked edge. "You will be the bridge between my reign and the dawn of the First Order," he whispered. Snoke's lips parted, voice a rasp of molded power. "Yes, Master." With that, the vessel's restraints fell away, and Snoke rose, an avatar of Sith intent, destined to guide new generations into darkness. In the clandestine war rooms below, the Emperor unveiled his ultimate gambit. The remnants of the Imperial fleet, hidden since the galaxy's purge, would serve as the First Order's backbone. Hollow images projected over curved tables, star destroyers cloaked in stealth fields, new dreadnought classes armed with dark side-induced weaponry, and thousands of stormtroopers genetically conditioned for unyielding loyalty. Moff commanders, survivors of fallen regimes, bowed in silent obeisance as Sidious entrusted them to Snoke's command. "Take these fleets beyond the unknown regions," Sidious commanded. "Let no world stand in your path. The Republic may have fallen once, but its ideals will never rise again under this darkness." Snoke's eyes glowed with preternatural cunning as he accepted the mantle. "I will shepherd the ashes of the Empire," he vowed, "until a new age is forged in darkness." As the First Order's seeds were sown across uncharted star charts, Sidious retreated into deeper secrecy. His body, ravaged by Mustafa's burns and the burdens of eternity, needed rest and continued preservation through arcane rituals. In the inner sanctum of Exile, he prepared the ritual chamber, where his spirit would be bound to new forms, ensuring his return should the galaxy ever threaten the Sith's dominion. When the holocron sealed itself and Snoke departed on a stealth corvette, Sidious withdrew into the shadowed galleries of the Citadel. Statues of ancient Sith lined the halls, their hollow eyes seeming to follow him, testaments to the lineage he had both inherited and subverted. He paused before one depicting Darth Bane, founder of the Rule of Two, and pressed the holocron fragment to the statue's cracked stone crest. The runes glowed one final time in approval, a silent oath exchanged across millennia. Outside, lightning cleaved the sky, thunder rolling like celestial drums. Sidious's silhouette merged with the darkness, a fallen star awaiting rebirth. He had cheated death before, through alchemy, through betrayal, through the occult sciences of the Sith. Now, he had ensured his spirit would endure in shadows and echo through Snoke's cold ambition. In the stillness that followed, the Citadel's ancient engines hummed once more, carrying Sidious's final gambit into the void. The First Order's rise would be swift and merciless, guided by Snoke's hand and sanctioned by Sidious's hidden will. And when the time came, the galaxy would remember the name Palpatine and learn anew the true depth of his deceit. He cheats death, returning for a final gambit from the depths of the Sith Eternal Fleet, shrouded beneath cloaks of darkness and storm. A lone vessel pulsed with unnatural life. Within its bowels, Sheev Palpatine lay entwined in arcane machinery, clamped by obsidian restraints, his flesh pieced together by dark alchemical tendrils. A cracked Sith dagger, its blade etched with ancient curses, rested at his side, a symbol of both his mortality and his unbroken will. With each thunderous heartbeat from the starship's reactor, the ember of his consciousness stirred. On the forest moon of Endor, Rey Skywalker held the Jedi texts in trembling hands beneath the rustling canopy. She sensed a tremor in the Force, an echo of a shadow she had thought vanquished. Above the trees, the Sith fleet emerged from hyperspace like a funeral procession, star destroyers grim and unblinking. The New Republic's hastily mustered defense cruised toward them, but Rey knew the real battle lay within herself and the destiny she carried. Back on the flagship, Palpatine's eyes snapped open, pupils dilated to inhuman slits. He drew breath through gnarled lungs, mechanical rasp, and ragged life entwined. With a weak, triumphant rasp, he slid the cracked dagger from its sheath and drew it across the palm of his hand, letting his blood drip into a basin of phosphorus serum. The fluid hissed and bubbled as it absorbed his essence. He whispered ancient words of power, and the chamber's machines hummed in response, siphoning dark life from his veins into the fleet's hidden networks. "Rise," he croaked. The single word rattled through the Force, a summons stronger than any Star Destroyer's blast. Rey, sensing the pull, ignited her lightsaber. Its blue blade cast dancing shadows across towering redwoods as she vaulted onto a speeder bike, racing toward the hidden Sith gateway carved into volcanic rock. There, beneath twin arches of carved skulls, the vessel's tendrils of energy shimmered like lightning. Rebel commandos fought desperately on a ruined battleground, but Rey saw only the churning maelstrom of Palpatine's will. Inside the gateway, the chamber thrummed. Holographic projectors flickered, displaying the galaxy's map entwined with dark ley lines converging at Endor. Palpatine stood at the apex, dagger raised. He drew a crimson arc in the air, slicing through both energy and reality, and exhaled. Let there be darkness eternal. Rey skidded to a halt, spearheading her way through blaster fire to his side. The air crackled as their blades met, her blue against his unnatural pallor and shadow. The cracked dagger sang with each parry, its edges keen and spiteful. Palpatine's voice rasped above the storm. "You cannot deny me. I am the culmination of all Sith. She countered, forcing him back over charred ground as the forest's light dimmed under the fleet's looming shadow. Your tyranny ends, she cried, voice steady despite the terror in her heart. Each strike sought not only to wound, but to sever the line of darkness he had cast across generations. Outside, resistance fighters pierced through Imperial cruisers, but on the forest moon, time stilled to the duel's rhythm, the clash of blades and wills echoing in a place once sanctified by Ewok's laughter. Palpatine unleashed lightning in raging arcs, tearing saplings from the earth. Rey summoned the Force as shield, stepping through pain to press forward. She raised her blade against his dagger, cleaving through the corrupted steel. The dagger shattered, shards of cursed metal raining down. Palpatine staggered, the first true wound he had felt in decades opening across his chest. He tasted mortality again in that instant, shock mixing with fury. He lifted his hands to call more power, but found none. His body shuddered as the spiderweb cracks in his armor spread, life seeping through jagged gaps. Rey lowered her saber. It's over, she whispered, chest heaving. The crystal glow from her blade softened as she deactivated it. Palpatine's eyes flickered in the darkness, a last ember of defiance. He opened his mouth to rage, but his voice failed, the dark alchemy collapsing. Behind her, resistance cheers rose as the final Imperial outpost on the moon fell. The fleet's energy faltered as the hidden networks collapsed with Palpatine's end. The sky brightened as sunlight pierced through the holoprojector haze, casting the forest in hopeful gold. Rey knelt beside him, watching as the Dark Lord's body convulsed and stilled. With reverence, she retrieved the cracked Sith dagger, now broken beyond repair, and placed it atop his breastplate. The forest breeze carried away whispered curses and dying breaths alike. As she walked back through the gateway, the first rites of the new Jedi dawn unfurled in her mind. Healing, renewal, balance. The resistance saluted her return, but Rey looked beyond them to the stars reborn by hope rather than fear. His end spawns a new generation's reckoning, long after the Emperor's final breath and the Death Star's flames cooled. His voice still whispered through the galaxy's darkest corners. On Korriban, in the shattered shadow of the Sith Academy's fallen towers, acolytes traced their fingers over cracked holocrons buried beneath centuries of dust. One fragment, a data slate hidden in a sealed catacomb, flickered with a pale green glow whenever a Force-sensitive mind passed by. It carried a single phrase, looped in a soft, distorted echo. Power remains, even in ruin. Those words lured seekers from across star systems, each believing they had found the key to restoring an empire once thought extinct. In the stinking warrens of Yavin 4th's Under-Citadel, smugglers and underworld lords trafficked in forbidden relics. Beneath the ancient temple's blooded obsidian floors, secret vaults guarded Sith alchemy manuals, death scripts, and coded messages Sidious had scattered like seeds. A whisper through a data slate passed hand to hand, promising gold, glory, or vengeance. Fragments of the Emperor's stratagem, lost to time, but alive in their cunning. As each rogue agent decrypted hidden passages, they found themselves bound by an unseen pact to resurrect the darkness they barely understood. Meanwhile, in the derelict corridors of Coruscant's lower levels, hollow visions of Palpatine's final address were replayed at rebel bazaars and pirate dens, stripped of context, until only one message remained. Obedience ensures safety. Crime syndicates, carved new territories by invoking the security his empire once pledged. The shadow gangs of the Outer Rim stitched together alliances under the banner of Imperial Remnant, an echo of Sidious's fear-driven unity. Even the Hutts found themselves compelled by ancient contracts, reissued in palimpsested script, that bore the Emperor's clenched fist in blood-red seal. In the remote reaches of the unknown regions, scouts stumbled across ruined star fortresses ringed by dead cruisers, remnants of the hidden Sith flotillas Sidious had bequeathed to Snoke. Explorers who dared to breach their hulks were met by automated defenses keyed to the Emperor's blink code, blaster turrets spouting warning drones that played an audio loop of his final chilling laugh. Those who survived returned as prophets of doom, speaking of an unbroken chain of command woven by Sidious's foresight. Back on Korriban, a new sect knelt before the cracked holocron fragment, their lips moving in silent recitation of Sidious's lesson: manipulate fear to shape destiny. They studied the Emperor's creation of the clone armies, his orchestration of planetary blockades, and the mechanics of his ultimate betrayal. With each recital, they grew bolder, engineering localized crises, planting false flags, and recruiting force-blind assassins to exact whispered executions. They wore the Imperial cog-emblazoned medal anew, forging their own hierarchy on foundations of fear. Yet the relics carried more than strategy. They bore the emotional poison Sidious had perfected. On Nar Shaddaa, orphaned children learned to barter lies for credits, believing deceit to be the galaxy's truest currency. On Mandalore, disillusioned nobles resurrected banners of tyranny, convinced freedom was but a myth. Even Jedi survivors felt the pull of Sidious's legacy. Aged knights wrestled with doubt, haunted by the question he had asked so long ago: who holds true power? Some succumbed, slipping into hidden knowledge that fractured their code. Others stood firm, forging new orders of guardians dedicated to extinguishing the Sith's final sparks. In the smoky back room of a Coruscant holonet station, a pair of operatives intercepted a transmission. Coordinates for a secret gathering on Dathomir, where whispers said the Emperor's spirit lingered in a hidden nexus. A ragtag team of former rebels and ex-Jedi vowed to intercept the meeting, determined to seize the holocron fragment once more and either destroy it or claim its power for themselves. They packed what remained of the old Republic's relics: a cracked comlink, a faded holoscroll, and a shard of Palpatine's shattered dagger, hoping to draw a final line under the Emperor's shadow. As the Resistance operatives slipped into hyperspace, the Sith underworld stirred. On Tatooine, a moisture farmer dug up a rusted datapad covered in Sith runes, unaware he held the key to a resurgence that could topple governments. In a hidden Sith holocrypt on Dromund Kaas, archivists taught acolytes the art of subversion, their voices echoing Sidious's doctrine of deception as doctrine. Throughout the galaxy, in 1,000 acts of greed and hatred, Sidious's teachings endured, not as history, but as living contagion. And yet, in the farthest reaches of the Outer Rim, a young woman closed the final text of the Jedi archives, her eyes bright with resolve. She held the promise of a new dawn, that even the darkest shadows could be cast aside by the light. As she meditated beneath twin suns, she heard another whisper through the Force, not of fear, but of hope. "Power remains," the hidden data slate had said, but she sensed the rest. "And so does the choice to rise above it." From legend to warning, his teachings lure new Sith. The meditation chamber's entryway was as silent as a tomb, yet inside, a single candle burned against the dark. Its flame, small and steady, cast long shadows across the obsidian walls. shadows that danced over the helmet and gauntlet, seated upon the pedestal, the broken remains of Darth Vader's armor. Here, on the Death Star's final resting place, Vader had found solitude, guiding his own atonement by the light of that solitary wick. Yet even in this quiet, the influence of Darth Sidious, the puppet master, echoed in every flicker. The Empire. Sidious forged collapsed in a blaze of star-killer beams and rebel triumph, yet the pattern he established, the promise of order through fear, proved irresistible. Where the Imperial cog once stamped uniforms, the New Order's Starkiller base adopted the same design philosophy, a gargantuan weapon delivered through terror. Later, the First Order, born from Sidious's hidden fleets, draped its officers in uniforms echoing Imperial lines, each insignia a subtle homage to the Sith Emperor's original brand of control. In every uniform crease and weapon specification, Sidious's blueprint for tyranny endured. Deep within the hidden vaults of the First Order, archivists catalogue holocrons and data slates salvaged from Exile and Korriban. Among them lies the cracked holocron fragment that once housed Sidious's final stratagem, its fractured facets still humming with ancient Sith injunctions. To cadets at the nascent Sith Academy on Coruscant's Undercity, these relics are equal parts scripture and cautionary tale. They learn that manipulation of fear, the orchestration of crises, and the surgical removal of dissent are the core tenets of true power, a curriculum drafted by Sidious himself. Back in Vader's chamber, Rey Skywalker occasionally visited, extinguishing the candle in silence, then relighting it as a vow that darkness, though it endures, must never go unchallenged. The candle's flame, symbol of fragile hope, stood opposite Sidious's legacy of extinguished stars and broken oaths. By meditating on that balance, she preserved the memory of what absolute power cost: betrayal, loss, and the near annihilation of the Jedi's light. As new threats arise, from warlords invoking Sidious's name to secret cabals quoting his edicts, the galaxy faces the same crossroads: succumb to the seductive promise of safety under a single hand, or risk freedom's chaos for the chance to shape one's own destiny. Across planets scarred by Sith rule, communities teach children the price of darkness through stories of Naboo's blockade, the Clone Wars, and the Death Star's devastation, each chapter an echo of Sidious's will. His death on Endor ended an era, but not his influence. To remember Darth Sidious is to grasp that tyranny's engine is neither starships nor lightsabers alone, but the persuasive power of fear, woven into law and psyche alike. In the candle's glow and in the archive's dust, his lessons remain. Absolute power is the greatest temptation and the gravest prison. Power isn't won on battlegrounds alone. It's secured in the shadows of deception. Rising from diplomat to emperor, Palpatine weaponized every law and whisper, bending both democracy and the Force to his will. His empire endured fear, propaganda, and clandestine control, lessons preserved in corrupted holocrons and secret orders. Today, as new tyrannies take root, his legacy warns us that the allure of absolute power is a siren's call, one paid for in betrayal, blood, and the erasure of liberty. Understanding his ascent is the first step towards safeguarding freedom from the darkness within.